All right, welcome into the post-game show, everybody. Dan Tanner, Altitude Sports Radio 92.5. Whew! Wow. That went from a snooze fest to a very intense basketball game in the fourth quarter. I mean, really, it was a complete snoozer until the fourth quarter got there because there was a 17-4 run by the Charlotte Hornets in that fourth quarter to tie it up at 94. The problem for the Nuggets is they just could not score the basketball for the first 9.5 minutes of that fourth quarter. Even when the starters came back in to close this thing out, the Nuggets were just having big time issues scoring the basketball in that fourth quarter. So obviously they get the win, okay? 107-104 the final. The Nuggets are now 9-1 on the second night of a back-to-back, which is the best record for that category in the NBA. And just my initial thoughts on this game, and I was thinking about this as the fourth quarter was progressing. Typically, this is a game that I would look at and say, this Nuggets team, even with a win, that's not a good win. That's typically what I would say. Against a Hornets team that is just bad already. They're in perpetual rebuild mode. They don't have Brandon Miller, the second overall pick in the draft last season. And they had a plethora of other guys out, other contributors out for the Charlotte Hornets. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of it was the final game of a 5-game East Coast road trip. It was the second night of a back-to-back. That fourth quarter was very emblematic of a team that was just completing a 5-game East Coast road trip on the second night of a back-to-back. I really think that's what that fourth quarter came down to. The Nuggets were just dead. And credit to the team. I mean, they gutted it out there at the end. And let's not forget, last night in Philadelphia, they had to do the same thing. So those are 2 games in a row to add on to the fact that it's the end of a 5-game East Coast road trip. It is the second night of a back-to-back, but they had to really battle it late in the fourth quarter over the last 2 nights. So I look at it as like this salvaged the road trip for me. And I said this as I was closing the show last night. A win in Charlotte salvages at least to where it's not a disastrous road trip. If they would have lost this game tonight, there's no doubt in my mind this would have been a horrendous, disastrous road trip for the Denver Nuggets. But they get the win. They finish 2-3 on the road trip. Hey, if you start a road trip, a 5-game East Coast road trip 0-3, and you come out of it 2-3, I mean, I look at that as glass half full. And again, one bad loss in Chicago prevented this from being a 3-2 road trip. But lots to get into here on the post-game show tonight. As always, feel free to leave me your comments in the comments section. I'd love to get to as many of those as I can. Give me your thoughts and questions, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can. In fact, we'll just start here. I want to get to this. Let's see here. Why is Zeke playing? Be nice to see. Why is it nice to see Zeke playing? Hey, look, I will say this, and I've been as hard as anybody on Zeke this year. He has not been good. In fact, he's been downright awful this year and really his tenure with the Denver Nuggets. Let's just be honest about that, okay? But with that being said, from what we've seen for the majority of Zeke Najee's career, and specifically this year where he's really struggled, he was at least not a negative for the Nuggets. And I actually thought he was pretty good on the defensive end of the floor. He had several key blocks that were in that fourth quarter that came in crunch time. In fact, Malone started Zeke at the backup 5 to start the second quarter. It's like, oh boy, here we go. Now, the reason Zeke was playing tonight, obviously, is because Russell Westbrook did not play and Peyton Watson did not play. They're going to be reevaluated when they get back to Denver. But Malone switched it up in the fourth quarter. He didn't have Zeke playing the backup 5. In fact, it was to the point where Nikola Jokic comes back into the game and they had Zeke playing some power or small forward, however you want to define it. I mean, it's the Nuggets are a pretty positionless basketball team at this point, but 22 minutes from Zeke tonight, 3 of 4 from the field, 3 rebounds, 5 blocks, 6 points. I mean, that's about as good a game as you're going to get from Zeke Naji, okay? And look, the Nuggets needed him to do something tonight. They don't win this game without those 6 points from Zeke Naji. Now, you could make the case, well, DJ could have come in and gotten you 6 points. Hell, even PJ Hall might have been able to step in and get you 4 to 6 points, something like that. It was a cool moment. Scott actually interviewed PJ Hall's parents in the crowd there in Charlotte because he is from the area, and Hunter Tyson is as well. That's another guy that was, I was looking at as possibly getting some minutes tonight. But hey, as much as I've criticized Zeke Naji this year, he did what he had to do tonight for the Nuggets to win. Okay, so I'll basically just leave it at that. And the 5 blocks, a couple of those were in key moments as well. Was he spectacular? No, not by any means. He was Zeke Naji. Okay, I'm not sitting here saying that Zeke Naji needs to all of a sudden, get back into the rotation somehow. That's not what I'm saying at all. He was forced into the rotation tonight because of a couple of injuries for Denver, specifically Peyton Watson. Okay, so look, yeah, he was a minus 17. I get it, but he did have a couple of big time blocks, and he was 3 of 4 shooting from the field. So, like I said, that's about as good as you're going to get from Zeke Naji in a spot rotational role like we saw from Zeke tonight. So, not great, but it didn't cost the Nuggets this win, is kind of how I would frame that. So, another game where Nikola Jokic is just extremely clutch down the stretch. I mean, is there anybody in the NBA over the last 5 to 7 years that you would rather have the ball in their hands when the game's on the line or in the final 2 minutes of a close game? It's Nikola Jokic. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Not only is he the best player in the world right now, I think he's also the most clutch player in the game today. He has just been so phenomenal over and over and over again for this team when they need him most in a tight game in the fourth quarter. He was obviously just incredible tonight. He had that little flip pass to Christian Braun, or no, it was Michael Porter Jr. in the paint, and just spectacular stuff from Nikola Jokic tonight. Christian Braun, I thought, was phenomenal again. And I highlighted CB last night. He was just as good, if not better than he was last night in Philadelphia. Inserted into the starting lineup, again, I talked about this last night, but it is really becoming apparent how valuable Russell Westbrook and Christian Braun are as far as their interchangeability, their ability to, go back and forth from the bench to the starting role and not miss a beat. Like, that really is valuable for this team with injury scenarios or matchup scenarios, or whether, one player's on a cold streak, the other's on a hot streak, whatever the case may be. That, I think that's a really, really valuable asset for Nuggets head coach Michael Malone, and Christian was rock solid tonight. I tell you what, I was getting on Kendrick Perkins for his stupid comments last night, saying that CB hasn't been what the Nuggets have hoped for this year. If you missed it, that's essentially what he said. And what I said last night is, well, that tells you everything you need to know about how many Denver Nuggets basketball games Kendrick Perkins has watched, because Christian Braun has been spectacular this year. For a late first round pick, a guy in only his third year, he has been phenomenal for this team on both ends of the floor. 2 of 5 from 3, 9 of 15 shooting. I mean, he drilled a 3 right out of the gate. He's shooting with confidence. I mean, what more can you ask from Christian Braun at this point? He has been really, really special for this team. And I keep saying this, but I really do believe it. And I love KCP, but Christian Braun has been just as good, if not better, than KCP ever was here with the Denver Nuggets. So yes, those were big shoes to fill with the departure of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to the Orlando Magic. But I mean, I didn't even see this coming. And I've been a big fan of Christian Braun. I've really liked his game. The only parts of his game I don't like are his outside shooting, but he's been pretty good in that area so far this year. So, Christian Braun has been absolutely phenomenal this year for the Nuggets. Jamal Murray sort of had an up and down game tonight. He finishes the game with 20 points. Anytime Jamal gets to that 20-point marker, I think the Nuggets have a pretty good chance of winning. And, I talked last night about the big three, Jamal, Nikola, and MPJ going off last night. And, that's the plan for this front office, or at least that's what they had hoped the plan was, and what the plan that they had envisioned. And 28 from Joker, 20 from Jamal, 15 from Michael, and then you add in 24 from Christian Braun. I mean, you can't lose that game. You can't lose a game where you have three starters at 20 points or more, and then your fourth starter at 15. So this was a really, really good win for the Nuggets tonight. I know it doesn't look great on paper or even look good when you're watching this game come down to the wire in the fourth quarter with Charlotte goes on a 17-4 run there in beginning of that fourth quarter, and they tie it up at 94. They eventually take the lead at one point, but credit to these Nuggets, man. I mean, this is a lot more of a special win than it may appear to be because of all of the things I previously mentioned. 5-game East Coast road trip. It's the final game, second night of a back-to-back. You're 0-3 to start the road trip. I mean, this road trip could have been a disaster for the Nuggets, and they were able to pull out a win last night in Philly and able to pull out a win tonight in Charlotte, and I thought salvaged the road trip. So, it's not a spectacular game by any means from the Nuggets, but teams like this, even in the circumstances and the scenario they were in tonight, have to be able to pull these games out. And by the way, you can tell, as well as Charlotte played in that fourth quarter, this is a very young, inexperienced basketball team. Like, once it got down to crunch time and you just turn the score off and just watch the last 2.5, 3 minutes of this game, you could tell who the better team was and who knew what they were doing, or at least who looked like they knew what they were doing versus the team that did not know what they were doing. And the Charlotte Hornets clearly do not know how to close out tightly contested games like we saw tonight, because they made a bunch of silly mistakes there at the end, and the Nuggets capitalized on them. And you foul Joker, silly foul. They actually ended up reviewing it. Actually, Charlotte challenged it, excuse me, and it was clearly a foul. But at that point, well, why not challenge it if you're Charlotte? I mean, I totally get it. It's free throws if you don't. So I get it. And you had one in the bag. So they should have challenged it, but it was obvious on the first replay that was clearly a foul on Nikola Jokic. He goes down, still has to make the free throws, drains both of them, and then they turn it over. Jamal gets the fast break, transition layup, and this thing was all but over. And that last sequence for Charlotte was really, really indicative of just how young and inexperienced this team is. So, look, my biggest takeaway from the game tonight is the Nuggets avoided disaster. They avoided a disastrous road trip. They can fly back to Denver tonight feeling good about the road trip, even though they lose in Chicago, one of their worst losses of the season. They eked out the game last night in Philly. They eked out the game tonight in Charlotte. But they got 2 wins to close out the road trip, and they can fly back to Denver feeling good about how this road trip ended. So, look, it is what it is as far as how poorly the Nuggets played in that fourth quarter. But I really do kind of put a lot of that on the fact of the circumstances that they were in tonight. So let's see here. Let's go through some of your comments. Kev says, "Hey, DT, what's up, Kev? Appreciate you listening, man." Let's see. Beer Man, Nuggets bench is trash, but nice to see Zeke get a point. Well, this version of the Nuggets bench is not very good. Okay. I will 100% agree with you there. I mean, that's what happened. As soon as I heard the news that Russ and Peyton Watson were not going to be playing tonight, And then you get the original starting five that started the season. That's why they're the original starting five. I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable with the starting five because they've shown that they're a very, very, very potent unit. But then you get to the problem of, oh boy, here we go. Here's the bench that we saw earlier this season without Russell Westbrook, by the way, and without Peyton Watson. I mean, two of your best bench players early on this season. I thought the bench was actually not horrendous tonight, okay? In fact, there was in the second quarter, I mean, I thought the second unit actually played pretty well. In fact, they actually built the lead up with Nikola Jokic off the floor. So you can say whatever you want about the bench, but I don't remember a time this season, maybe once or twice, even with a fully healthy bench, where the bench actually not only treaded water when Nikola Jokic wasn't on the floor, but built up a lead, and not just by a couple of points. They extended the lead by like 10 points. So, and then the starters come back in with Jokic, and they kind of struggled in that second quarter. I mean, they had a 17-point lead, was their big lead in that second quarter, and it was down to 8 at halftime. So the bench really built that lead up. Now, the bench was not good in the second half. There's no doubt about that. But in that second quarter stint, I mean, I was just as surprised as probably everyone watching was that they were able to build up a lead, not only tread water, but build that lead up. So, look, the Nuggets scraped this one out, and they improved to 30-19 on the season. And that's all the standings are going to say on this one. So, all right, let's get to more of your comments here. Kevin says, although this is a really bad road trip. Yeah, look, it wasn't a successful road trip. There's no doubt about that. But like I said, they salvaged what could have been a horrendous, disastrous road trip. That's what tonight's win was. They salvaged what could have been a disastrous road trip into something that's much more palatable. Okay? They get to come back home. They have like 7 of their next 8 games are at home. Get to come home feeling good about themselves, getting back-to-back wins. So that was really great to see. All right, let's see here. Let's get good news travels fast. Welcome to the show. Okay, so what's the excuse for their performance in Philly? Coming in rested. Come on, Dan. They barely beat the 2 bad teams on the road. Look, I'm not going to give this team any excuses in Philly. If you listened to my show last night, I said they were horrendous on the defensive end. That's what happened. Tyrese Maxey, they couldn't stop that guy whatsoever. But again, they got the win, okay? And let me remind you, it's February 1st. These are what I like to call the dog days of the NBA season, okay? You hear that a lot in baseball. That's like July and early August, or just sort of that stretch of the schedule where it's just kind of murky and weird, and you're just sort of in like no man's land at that point of the season. I really think that starts right around New Year's Day, January 1st, and ends when you get to the All-Star break. So that's kind of my rough estimate of what I mean by the dog days of the NBA season. And I get it. The wins in Philly and the win tonight were not impressive whatsoever, as far as they should have beaten up on worse teams, significantly worse teams. But they salvaged the road trip. That's the positive I'm taking out of this, okay? I mean, if they lose tonight or they lose last night and win tonight, this is a disastrous road trip. So at least they were able to get close to 500 on this 5-game tough stretch. And, from what we've seen, how inconsistent this team has been this year, I'll take that. All right, Mr. Punch Rock Groin, appreciate you listening. Charlotte completely messed up the last 18 seconds, down 1. You wait until 5 seconds remain and drive to the hole. It's worked out a ton in the past. The Nuggets got lucky. Well, yeah. I mean, you're just kind of hitting on what I already said, that the difference in the last 2 minutes of this game were two teams that one is very experienced in closing out games, tightly contested games, and one team that has little to no experience closing out tightly contested games. And that's exactly what we saw tonight. The execution from the Charlotte Hornets in the last 2 minutes, I wouldn't even say the last 18 seconds, I would say about the last 2 minutes of this game were horrendous. They made several mistakes on the defensive end. They couldn't figure out what kind of play they were trying to run on the offensive end. Yeah, and you're right. Driving to the basket, needing a three that's what I'm talking about. Experienced teams don't do that kind of stuff. So sure, did the Nuggets get lucky? I mean, call it whatever you want. Sure, but they got the win. That's all I care about. All right, let's see here. Deanna says, thanks for the 5 blocks, but he was minus 17. The whole point is that the bench lets starters rest and doesn't tank. Yeah, no, I get it. Talking about Zeke Naji there. The bench lets starters rest and doesn't tank. Well, again, in that second quarter, the bench actually built the lead up by extended the lead by 10 points. So, and we've hardly seen that at all this year from any of the Nuggets bench rotation, different combinations of the bench. So it's you have Zeke Naji playing 22 minutes and he's your starting center in the second quarter and they're able to extend the lead by 10 points. I take that as a win. I mean, I take that as a huge win. Who saw that come in tonight? This second unit that was in there tonight, extending the lead in the second quarter when Nikola Jokic is not on the floor by 10 points. You can't ask for more than that from this unit tonight specifically. All right, let's see here. Kevin says, I disagree with you, DT. 2 great games doesn't salvage the road trip. Well, that's fine. I think it does. So, again, yes, it was not a successful road trip, but they salvaged it from being a disaster. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't a successful road trip by any means, okay? And that loss in Chicago was very, very bad. But if they lose last night in Philly, which they easily could have, or they lost tonight in Charlotte, which they easily could have, it turns it into a salvage road trip into a disaster. I mean, that's really what my point is for that. But yeah, feel free to leave me your comments. I'm going to check and see if we can hear from Michael Malone here in just a second, because I'd be very interested to hear what he had to say after the game. In fact, he's up on Altitude TV's Twitter. So let me get this up for you all, and let's go out to Charlotte and hear from Nuggets head coach Michael Malone. Oh, excuse me. One sec.
I was going to ask about Christian Braun too. You mentioned other players having to step up and the efficiency that he's playing with right now. I feel like it wasn't too long ago you were saying, stay off of social media, don't listen to it. You'll get out of the slump just fine. How can you say about the way that he's responded?
Oh, he's responded in a big way, and it was funny. I made the decision going into the Knick game to take him out of the starting lineup, and here he is a few nights later, playing 38 minutes. And to your point, 24 points, 11 rebounds. I felt that he was everywhere. He was attacking. He was shooting the 3 ball with confidence. He was guarding. I think tonight was a snapshot into all the different areas that CB can help you win in. And we need that from him. He's just such an intangible player for us and checks so many boxes. You know what you're going to get from Nikola every night. You know what you're going to get from Jamal, Michael Porter, who had 15 and 10. Didn't make as many threes as he would want, and we got a ton of wide open shots. But it's great to have CB stepping up and playing the way he's playing, and he's done that all season, to be quite honest.
Okay, so there is Nuggets head coach Michael Malone. One thing I agree with, one thing I disagree with. He said Christian Braun is interchangeable or whatever it was. That is true, and I've talked about that. Like, for him to be able to go back and forth from the starting lineup to the bench and still have close to the same level of success is a huge asset for this team. The one thing I will disagree with what he said there is he said Nikola is consistent every night, which is true. Or he said, what you're going to get from Joker every night, which is true. And then he said, what you're going to get from Jamal Murray every night. That is not true, coach. That is the one thing I was like, really? Because I've talked about all year. One of the biggest problems for this team is that Jamal Murray is so damn inconsistent. Look at how much better the Nuggets play when Jamal Murray plays well. Okay? The problem is he's far too inconsistent this year. Now, I will say there were more inconsistent games versus not earlier in the season. He's starting to put together more consistent games as he's gotten into better shape, as he's worked his way into the season. as you know, we're almost 50 games into the regular season. He's gotten in better shape. He has been more consistent than earlier in the season. But that's one of the biggest issues with this Nuggets team right now. Inconsistencies all over the place, other than Christian Brown and Nikola Jokic, quite frankly. And then you could probably sprinkle in Russell Westbrook in there as well as one of the guys on this team that's been reliably consistent this year for the Denver Nuggets. Aaron Gordon, I don't think his play has been super inconsistent, although he didn't have a great game tonight. But he's been out 20 plus games with injuries, so he's been inconsistent as far as his availability. So again, Coach is right saying that CB and Joker are consistent, and CB is a Swiss Army knife, which is absolutely true. But to say Jamal has been consistent, I think that's a little bit far-fetched. But I will say he is starting to ramp it up to the point where he's becoming more consistent game to game. It's still not where I'd like it to be. I mean, let's be honest. Jamal Murray should be able to average 25 points a game. I mean, you're playing with the best player in the world. You're playing with the best passer of all time. He should average 25 points a game. And Michael Porter Jr., again, super inconsistent this year. He's had a couple of really good games. He was excellent in Philly last night. Thought he had a okay game tonight. Nothing spectacular. He was 0 of 6 from 3, but the thing I liked about Michael's game tonight was the fact that he was ice cold from beyond the arc. I mean, the Nuggets were just as a whole. They were awful from 3 tonight. But he was going to the rim, and he was finding ways to get to the free throw line. He was finding ways to get easy buckets when his outside shot is not falling. And I've said this all season long. That is a really big development in Michael Porter Jr.'s game this year. His ability to not shy away when his outside shot isn't falling. He understands now that he's 6'10", 6'11", whatever he is, and he's playing with the best passer of all time. Get to the rim. And that's what he's been doing this year. So, look, if Michael has bad outside shooting nights, it is what it is, as long as he's trying to get to the rim when that is the case. If he's on fire from deep, I mean, just keep shooting the ball. I don't care. But the maturation in his game has been his ability and his understanding of getting to the basket when his outside shot isn't falling. And that's what he did tonight. And, this was just one of those games. You typically see this from teams on the second night of back-to-backs and the last game of a long road trip where your shooting percentage is not very good because the legs are dead. And where does your shooting start? Your legs. I mean, the Nuggets shot 46.6% from the field tonight. That's not good. They shot 18.9% from 3, 7 of 37. And one of the first comments, let me see if I can find it here. Let's see. Josh says, quit shooting threes. Well, here's the thing, guys. We complain that the Nuggets don't shoot enough threes, and then we complain when they shoot too many threes. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what the formula is. Like, I don't know what the right balance is for the Denver Nuggets. I don't know if they should be shooting more threes or not, because I'm torn. They have the personnel to take 37 threes in a game and shoot close to 40%. They have those guys. They have Jamal Murray. They have Nikola Jokic, who is the second or the first highest three-point shooter in the NBA right now. MPJ, excellent outside shooter, although he was ice cold tonight. I still think the Nuggets are trying to figure that out. I do. I think they're trying to figure out, are we just going to try and bully teams in the paint, let Joker go to work down there, everyone cuts to the basket, or are we going to try to get more consistent from beyond the arc? And I tell you what, they better figure that out quick, because they're going to need to really hone in on what this team is trying to do on a consistent basis come playoff time. Are you going to be a high-volume three-point shooting team in the playoffs, or are you not going to be a high-volume shooting team in the playoffs? And they need to really start ramping up and figuring that out as the season goes along. But, hey, like I said, y'all can think whatever you want. I take these 2 wins as a positive for the Nuggets, that they were able to salvage what could have been an absolutely disastrous road trip. And like I said, they have a ton of home games coming up. In fact, they play a back-to-back with the Pelicans coming up on Monday and Wednesday. Then they've got the Magic here in town. Then they go to Phoenix, and then they've got another 4-game homestand. So, like I said, 7 of their next 8 games are going to be at Ball Arena, and a really good against some bad teams too. The Pelicans stink. Orlando's good, but they're dealing with some injuries. Phoenix, who knows what the hell they are. Bradley Beal will probably be gone by then. And then they have a back-to-back home series with Portland. Then you've got these Charlotte Hornets coming to town, and then they finish it off at home against the Lakers. So those are 8 incredibly winnable games coming up for the Denver Nuggets. But that's going to do it for the post-game show tonight, everybody. Nuggets finished the road trip 2-3, started at 0-3, get back-to-back wins last night in Philly, tonight in Charlotte, and I thought they salvaged the road trip. So appreciate everybody listening, and we'll talk to you coming up on Monday for the Nuggets matchup against the New Orleans Pelicans. Have a wonderful night, everybody.